Hello, hello again, and welcome back to Love at First Right, or welcome if you're here for the first time. This is our small, intimate band of writers and readers who like to talk about what makes a story sing and what absolutely enthralls us as writers and readers, and what we can do to better ourselves if we are writers, to make it a more satisfying experience for us and for our readers, and maybe to understand um, the process of writing more if we're readers and are just interested, or understanding what exactly is happening to us as we read, and why we become so wrapped up in something that we know isn't real, that we know is a figment of someone's very rich imagination. Today, this time, I want to talk about horror. Now, those of you who have seen more than one of these and are part of our little coffee writing clash, right? Know that I tend to write either historical spy fiction, or I'm also writing this epic romance series. It's a fantasy romance. I don't write horror, although I've always wanted to write horror, but there's a really good chance that I'll never write horror. I'll never get around to it, mostly because I simply don't have the courage to do so. I think that in order to write, for me, the kind of horror story I want to write, the kind that makes the earth move beneath my feet, I really have to be willing to go there, go to a place that exposes the cracks in my own very carefully constructed worldview. And I think that in order to do that, it takes just such grit and guts. And I hope that I have that. I hope that I have that level of courage someday. My daughter does. My daughter loves horror, and she's 12 years old, and she writes horror. She watches horror, and it's just amazing to me. And she sleeps like a baby at night. So go figure. But I think horror is just an incredibly important genre, and I think it casts a shadow over every genre, including literary fiction. Um, because it takes us down, similar to romance, right? It takes us down to something that is very basic and human. We all have. We all respond to fear. We are all motivated by fear. And I've been thinking about if there is sort of a common denominator for the type of fear that we are motivated by, and that we bring into our fiction, whether we are coming to it as writers or readers or both. And I think that the fear of estrangement is at the core of humanity, is at the core of every character that we write or experience. I've been revisiting Mary Shelley's Frankenstein recently. I've been doing it from a variety of perspectives, from reading the book, which I loved. I read it years and years ago, and I've read it 2 or 3 times since. And there's also just this incredible ballet that I found online, actually, that was performed at the Royal Opera House, that is probably the most stunning and true to Mary Shelley's version of Frankenstein that I've ever seen. And I highly recommend you check it out. Go on YouTube, Frankenstein, Royal Opera House. But Mary Shelley really delves into estrangement. She creates two characters which are sort of like a funhouse mirror reflection of one another. There is Dr. Frankenstein, who is a brilliant scientist, who is in love with his fiancée Elizabeth, and has this very rich life. And there is the monster that he creates out of corpses. And in creating this monster, he completely destroys his own life and estranges himself basically from humanity. And the monster himself is also estranged. And goes about, he is rejected by his creator, who feels that he made a great mistake in playing God. And so he goes about trying to find anyone to love him. And with each disappointment, he becomes more and more destructive. And there's this incredible quote from the monster, and I'm going to butcher it a bit. Okay, this is a paraphrase, but he says, "I have love within me, the likes of which you cannot even imagine. But if I cannot find love, then I will destroy everything in my path, and the destruction that I can put upon the world is greater than you can even conceive of. It's, something like that. It was much better written than that. As I can't quite remember exactly the way he said it, but it was an incredibly powerful quote. It's an incredibly powerful sentiment. And I think that when you look at a villain and a hero, um, you see the different paths they take, all for the sake of finding someone or something to love them. Perhaps the hero is looking to save all of humanity, or just save the girl, or the boy, or whatever it is. And that, and perhaps the hero has, of course, a much more constructive way of doing that, of trying to help, of self-sacrifice. And the villain is equally driven to find love and acceptance, and and to try to fix this feeling of estrangement that he or she feels. And yet, um, the anger that grows with each disappointment, is what creates the tension in the story, the horror in the story. And we can see this in almost every genre. The way that estrangement works, um, whether a character estranges him or herself, or becomes estranged because of a set of circumstances, whether they are historical or paranormal, or whatever device that we are using as writers. And I think that as writers, it is incumbent upon us to really look at estrangement in the eye, um, at least from our character's point of view, if it's too painful or fearful to do it from our own. And I do think that if we do it from our own point of view, that we probably will end up with a richer story, and we combine it with the character. But you never know. Excuse me, my dog. Speaking of estrangement, he's feeling estranged, and that I am not paying him the proper attention. So he would like to join us. Um, but I think that when we really look at what's going on with our characters, let's say it's a love story, if we are only, um, I think if we are only looking at it from the point of view of someone who is searching for love and is doing so from a sort of optimistic, um, stance, purely, I think it can be very satisfying, but it can also lack dimension. And when when we also look into the level of estrangement that they may feel, that which might be driving them, um, it I think it can create, an opportunity for all sorts of 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 conversations that that character can have, of situations that they might find themselves in, um, that are incredibly rich, and and take that character places. Um, I was thinking about, I was having a conversation with a friend, and we were trying to challenge ourselves, trying to find a character who was not estranged, who was estranged but didn't mind. And we were really scratching our heads about it. And the closest we could come up with was Hannibal Lecter. And yet that fell apart almost immediately, because what is he doing? He foments a connection with Clarice Starling, at least in Silence of the Lambs. I think that it's with a different character in the previous Hannibal Lecter books. But he too, here he is in solitary confinement in some, dreadful, psychiatric facility for, the people who are criminally insane. And yet, he who does he connect with? He connects with this young woman who comes to interview him. And the entire film, and the entire book, and his entire world, uh, in that context, starts revolving around her. Not even around his drive to kill, which is strong, but it is mostly around her. So that estrangement is very real. That catalyst for why we do everything that we do. It is love and estrangement, and the push and pull of that is what creates this marvelous dramatic tension, and really allows a story and a character to blossom and go to places you never imagined that it could go. So thank you, and I look forward to next time. And until then, watch some horror movies, read some horror stories, and see what you think.